Has to be expected. Joe Biden is executive order happy right now. This isn't unfamiliar territory. Trump was like this as well. This is sort of the dangers that you're dealing with when you're dealing with not only the power that the presidency has, but more so um, how willy-nilly it can be utilized, in which again you have virtually no say in what it is these guys do. It's almost as if it's a structural problem with this the thing you called government. But part of his executive orders was an interesting one, and it was this executive order right now which kind of gets the ball moving on a lot of what we have been talking about in the past, and the subject matter of women no, I can't say that, that's offensive. Transgendered women in sports. Okay, so as you guys can see right here, there's this executive order that is preventing and combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation. Now, the reason why people have been out of shape, because again, it's doubling down on like some of the Civil Rights Act and these different titles, in which if the state basically or federal government is funding you, giving you some sort of funding, then you have to abide by these certain rules. So, of course, what everybody immediately went to, and they use it as an example right here: discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation manifests differently for different individuals, and it often overlaps with other forms of prohibited discrimination, including discrimination on the basis of race or disability. For example, transgender Black Americans face conscionable high levels of workplace discrimination, homelessness, and violence, blah, blah, blah. And say it is the policy of my administration to prevent and combat discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation, and to fully enforce the title to prohibit discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation. Is the policy of my administration to address the overlapping forms of discrimination. And it goes enforcing prohibition, on sex discrimination on the basis of gender or sexual orientation. And the reason why you saw this sort of manifest on Twitter, there was a hashtag. I forget what the actual hashtag was, but it's like Joe Biden erasure of women, right? And someone put it in a great detail here in this tweet that I'm going to show you guys right here. Who is, I'm not sure who she is, but women put President of the United States in the White House, Black women in particular, the same women whose girls benefit from sports scholarships, the same women who are overrepresented in the prison population. And on day one, a white man, Joe Biden, signs away their rights. Such a betrayal. I have so much that I want to say on this. I have so much that I want to say. But let's start by saying sort of this is the inevitable thing when it comes to the lunacy of the left. And as you give them power, if you allow that power to exist for them to have, they will use it to do some very loony things, because they've fallen so far down the rabbit hole of just craziness that they can't turn around at this point. So it's going to continue to get worse, right? So things that sound crazy as you talk to your friends or your, even your family members, and it just sounds very, very crazy, but it then becomes an implementation. And it becomes law, or it becomes executive order, or it becomes something that is going to be enforced across the board, which creates problems, of course. Now, in this case, we're discussing female athletes, right? Now, of course, as we already have seen with high school, track and field more so in particular, where you have people that are transgendered, that are at a competitive advantage, because no matter what you do, biology is still a thing. And these guys are guys and the gals, depending on what way you want to put it, guys or gals. I don't care or whatever they identify as. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Whatever you call them, whatever they call themselves, they're stronger than than the men. Oh, excuse me, than the women. Excuse me, and or what they call cisgendered, which is a term that people seem to use nowadays. And they dominate them, right? And now the door has been swung wide open where you have, if you don't give someone a scholarship, basically, though they, again, I think you are a criminal if you are a parent that has somehow transitioned, rather, your child in terms of their gender. I believe you should be thrown in jail. But that's neither here nor there. What basically this is saying is that, and I guess it speaks to the larger problem, but basically that, yeah, if you discriminate against them, you will be held accountable for that. And yes, that is a literal form of discrimination. See, the term discrimination has always been hilarious one to me because people look at it as, because of the Civil Rights Act or the Civil Rights era, people look at it as an inherently bad term, when by literal definition, every single individual discriminates, every single one. There's not one individual that discriminates. You discriminate if you're in a monogamous relationship. You have effectively discriminated against every single woman, every other woman in the world. Discrimination is it's not a good or bad thing. It's just a thing that individuals do. They discriminate throughout their daily hell. That's what private property is, right? It is the exclusive right to discriminate with that particular item or thing or whatever it is. Right? Not everybody can have access, and you can decide who can have access, and in deciding who can and cannot have access to your private property, that is an act of discrimination. By literal definition. Unfortunately, because of what happened historically in this country, people conflate it with, okay, racism. And it's not. That's not. But as you know, as it manifests itself here, yes, by literal definition, if you decide not to give a transgendered athlete a scholarship because, well, they're not actually, they were born women, right? Well, you are discriminating. And what they are saying is that is a bad thing, is what Mr. Joe Biden and his administration certainly is saying. And the lady's right. Say what you will about this Alan May, she's completely correct. A lot of black women do benefit from these athletic scholarships. I say this as I'm not a black woman, but I say this as a former track and field athlete. And a lot of black female athletes, go that route. And it's, they talk about the erasure. And I think this is what a lot of people on the other side, leftists are starting to finally wake up to this. But a lot of people on the other side have been saying that that's exactly what this sort of over or hyper emphasis on this transgenderism is doing. It's a erasure of women, right? Because the benefit only goes one way, right? The woman's not going to see any benefit, or rather, if a woman transitions to a man, she competes with the men, she's going to get dominated. Like, or now he is going to get dominated. Like, this is how it works. The benefit is only going one way, and that's when a man transitions into a woman and then dominates them in those set sports. Like that, it only goes one way anyway. So, of course, the black women or the black women or white women or Hispanic women, any women, if there are transgendered athletes that decide they want to take up a sport, they're going to be at a severe advantage physically. And if this continues to go the route that it does, yeah, they will consider it discrimination. And here you are. See, this is what the lunacy gets you. Now, what I will say about this is that this has been a thing with Democrats for a very long time. Not just black women, black people. It's a hilarious thing where what ends up happening is that I'm trying to say this say this in a way that's gonna keep the video monetized if I pull the segment and put it on YouTube or something, or Facebook or whatever. All right, so black people, we already know that they're the only racial minority that votes as high of a percentage as they do for one party, right? We already know that. And 95% is just is unbelievable, but that's what they do. Okay, so they put them in office, And historically, you've gotten absolutely nothing out of it. You see, it's happening with Obama. Where the reality of the situation is, they, like, for example, the LGBT community was placed over priority over you. And you're seeing this again with them and immigrants as well. They place more emphasis on doing something for them with their power than you. Now, I, of course, will make the argument that you shouldn't be expecting anybody to do anything for you. I'm just using this as an example to highlight the fact that they have been using you. And they will prioritize other groups. And effectively, in this case, that ends up hurting a certain group, in this group, black women, in your ability to get scholarships. But again, it speaks to a larger issue as well with school funding. Why the state is funding schools, or federal government's funding schools, is an issue in itself. But this is what you get, right? When they do fund school, they're able to levy that power because your funding is coming primarily from them, whether it be in form of a direct subsidy or they are subsidizing the students, which then spend money on your collegiate institution. So it's the same thing. Where basically they are in the grant and loan business. Then now, of course, that has inflated the cost. Topic for another conversation. But if they are funding you, they got you by the balls, for lack of better terms, so they can do stuff like this. See, this is why the problem is always the issue, and why I am not as. See, a lot of people focus on the symptoms because they're so hell bent on trying to get the right people in office, or the right people to fill the positions, or the right people, or their people to hold the positions of power. Well, I recognize as a structural power problem. And it doesn't matter if the right or the wrong person, whatever the right person is, I don't know what the hell that is, but whether the right or wrong person gets it, it's still an issue. The power itself is a problem. Why are taxpayer dollars being used to fund these institutions in the first place? Why can't this be decided or by the individual institutions and they make the rules up for themselves because they, I don't know, have to compete with other collegiate universities, and they have to compete for everybody's, each other's dollars and stuff like that? Why this is even a thing? Well, we know why. But this is the problem. But it sounds lunacy. Yes, I've like, if you would have asked me, look, my last year was almost 8 years ago. My last year of competing in collegiate track and field was 2013. Okay. If you would have asked me even then in 2013 that we'd be having a conversation whether women should be formerly men transitioned into women, so transgendered women, female athletes, well, not female, whatever. I don't know what they identify as, but you get it. People that have transitioned from men to women that then go compete against them, being able to fucking do that. I would have never thought that would even be a conversation that we'd be having, but here we are. They and Democrats have painted themselves in a corner because that's their entire existence. That's all they have, is they've went all in over the last about half decade or so, where everything is about the identity. Everything. It's about, identifying a particular group and claiming that you are going to do something to help that particular group. So the more they do that, the more crazy this is going to get. And it does sound insane, and it sounded far more insane, however, 8 years ago. If you would have brought that to me, I'd be like, there's no way that we'd be having that conversation. Like, why will we? No, of course you can't allow them to compete against women. It's not fair. But I like the whole idea that people are talking about this women erasure, because that's been the approach anyway, right? Because look, it's like, and I know I have transgender followers, and I mean no disrespect to you. You know who you are. You know what you are. But you can understand the frustration of a person who is a particular way, and they are that particular way. And then what you do is you say to that person that all it takes is you in your mind to identify as whatever you want to identify as, and then you become part of that group. No matter how, if the advantage is fair or unfair, you become a part of that group. So that's saying that's all it takes. You want to identify as a woman, you are a woman. And they put you on an equal playing field with people that were not born that way. And this is why I've said about the racial thing. People ragged on Rachel Dolezal. Why y'all were ragging on Rachel Dolezal? I interviewed Rachel Dolezal, by the way. There is literally no fucking difference. If someone can identify as one, like they can literally change their gender, like at a snap of a finger, that means that yes, they could do the shit with race too. So if some motherfucker, was white or wanted to be black and they decided that's how, Sean King, I guess we have to take his word for it because that's how he identify as. And it sounds lunacy. It sounds like crazy right now. But hell, like I said, 7-8 years ago, it would have sounded crazy that we're having this conversation about former men competing with women. Don't sound as crazy anymore, does it? But that's the rabbit hole that these guys have painted themselves in. So that's what we're going to keep going down it, and it's going to get crazier and crazier and crazier. Look, man, I hate to see it, man. I say this as a former track and field collegiate athlete, and that is one of the sports that is going to be impacted the most. I don't like to see that. I do not like to see that. I don't. I just simply don't. Like, it's is there a solution? I don't think it's a clean cut solution. I think the best that can happen is that transgendered women, female athletes compete against other transgendered female athletes, but I doubt there ever be great enough numbers of them. Well, never mind. I take that back. At some point there will, and that's probably what you're gonna have to do, is give them their own little section where they compete against each other. But them competing against women is lunacy. It's unfair. And the fact that people find that offensive for you to even mention that lets you know how crazy the world is right now. Like, that shouldn't be offensive. It shouldn't be offensive to mention. I could be like, no, you shouldn't be able to compete because it's unfair. Right? Like, it's a sport at the end of the day. And obviously, for a reason, we separate the genders. Right? We don't run against each other. We don't compete against each other. There's a fucking reason that we've done that. It's not just because for reasons, or just like no reason. We've done that for a reason. They are fundamentally different. Men and women are different. That's just what it is. Right? So for you to sit there and separate or act like you blur the lines effectively, and you just say, well, if you decide you want to identify as that, then whatever. And we have to sit up here and take your word for it. And because discrimination is this spooky ass word, and we don't want nobody denying you your what they say, denying your existence is what they say in the event that you don't identify them in the way that they identify themselves. You're denying their existence. But they don't seem to hold that standard when it comes to women. People that are born women, are you denying their existence? And that's why the whole Joe Biden erasure of women was trending on Twitter.